Okay, everybody, welcome to the session from the David Sowerby, and he's the David owned the company called Straker, which has a content management system, and you can integrate your web page, and then you can automatically localize your web pages. Now today he's going to present us why the digital content is important in this life for your company, what's involved. Okay, please welcome Mr. David Sowerby.
Hello. I was saying that before, we normally do these conferences all over the world. I was in Mexico last week and Korea about a month ago and somewhere else before that. This is the first time I've done one, it's only an hour up the road, so it was actually a joy to come up here. I don't have to travel somewhere to be here. Are you guys familiar with web content management platforms and digital content and multi-language and those sorts of things? So what I wanted to do today was just take you through a little bit about Straker, myself and another guy owning the company. Some of the things that I guess we see happening around content in what we call digital age, some of the challenges around multi-language, and then if it's getting boring, we can flick straight into the product and I guess show you actually how we have technically solved some of the problems that we've seen around multi-language. So if you want to race forward and just go straight to the product, just tell me. Otherwise, I'll keep going through. Just a little bit about the company, more so you know that we all have a view that we know what we're talking about. The company is about 10 years old now. Was originally started down in Auckland. I'm actually an Australian, so don't call me New Zealander. But the other guy owns the company is a Kiwi. Our first major client was back in '99 was Tourism New Zealand. So from the start, we actually had to deal with multi-language issues on the web before they became issues on the web. We've got about 120 odd clients globally. I think now we manage about 1.5 million pages of multilingual content that's been translated every month. We have about 150 translation partners all over the world. We've got a footprint in every major geography bar Africa. We're about to have one in North Africa very shortly. And our core client base is in the US and Europe, but which is what we're going to go through more and more, seeing a major focus on Asia. And there's some reasons for that, and there's some reasons that's accelerating.
Okay.
In terms of the types of clients, I think our biggest website, monthly websites, is with the DG of Agri, the European Commission, Directorate General of Agriculture, and it's about 35,000 pages in 22 languages. And we help them manage content flows and things that you have to deal with around that. So, I guess what we've seen and what we're seeing accelerating is there's three factors that are driving a major change in what we call the translation workflow. So the translation industry itself is worth about $16 or $17 billion annually around the world, and it pretty much revolves around somebody writing a piece of content in Word, or a PDF document, sending it off to a translation company, getting it back and publishing it somewhere. What you see with the internet though is a major change in the way that content is created, managed and published. So you've got three major dynamics which is causing a fair bit of angst, if you like, within the translation industry. And there's lots of companies who are trying to deal with this, and if you want to talk about the strategy around Google Translate, I'm happy to tell you what we think is going on there, but there's some major companies who have recognised there's an issue here and trying to solve it. Three major ones are volume. So what you've got going on in the world now is this concept of distributed ethics. So I'm not talking about blogging and twittering and those sorts of things. This is where companies are creating content and pushing it out to customers all over the world. So historically, the way that most content management platforms and most people have dealt with this this whole concept now of distributed editing, where lots of people can go in and access content because it exists on the web now, has increased massively the volume of content that's being generated. Speed, so one of the major challenges that the translation industry has is just the speed digital content's created. You can get different estimates, but it's 8 or 10 times faster than an offline platform. And I can show you, when I get into the product, I'll show you our original strategy around managing translation workflow and why it broke. It cost us about $1 million, and we had to try and fix it up really fast. And the third one, which is really emerging, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the geopolitical implications of what's happening in the world now and why this becomes a major drama, is access. So historically, content's been effectively, downloaded on your desktop or your laptop, looked at in a PDF or a Word document and consume that one. You've seen a shift now where there's a reasonable portion of that content is now managed through the browser, so the web browser. But mobile and desktop applications are more and more becoming important in terms of people consuming content through those platforms. Particularly in sort of, if you like, developing economies like India and China, the estimations around the volume, and we'll go through it, but the estimations around the volume of content that's going to be consumed through 3G and 4G mobile technology is way above what it is right now. So what that means is that if you're now creating content to be consumed by an audience, you can't just lock it down to one platform. If all you're doing is writing a PDF document, put it on a website, you're severely narrowing down your audience that can access that content. And so companies are having to grapple with the concept of where does that content get created, where does it live, and in what format. So, and we'll go through it, but you'll start to get the sense that it makes a lot more sense for a company to have that content existing as HTML or in a digital format than having it stored in offline silos in Word documents all over the place, which is currently what most companies do. There we go. So you probably see some of these stats, but if you look at the little purple chart, is basically showing the estimated volume or estimated growth in literally the amount of data that's pushed around the web. So it's not plateauing, it's going up an exponential curve. So by 2012, you're looking at, right now we'd say there's lots of information on the web, you're looking to double that in the next 3 or 4 years. So the problems that companies are dealing with now are not going to go away, they're going to get worse. And we're going to get into this, but what you're seeing and where a lot of that growth is being driven from is in Asia. So, the internet penetration rates in China and India, for example, are 20-25%, massive populations and lots of growth, and we'll tackle that in a second. So what's happening, and this is where we get into, this is important for you to understand if you think of the translation industry or multiple content as an ecosystem, that there's some major factors that are driving change. So historically, the US and maybe Europe has driven most of the demand in terms of what's happening on the web and the creation of content. But you've got, by 2020, there's going to be basically 500 million Chinese who are online and access to the web through a broadband connection. So, there you go, I broke my little build. India, same scenario, you've got about 80 million now, going up to 300 million. So what it means is that the volume of content that's being created is now going to be much greater over here than it's historically been, which has some other implications around language. Just finish there you go. Finish off.